What is the ceiling for Marvin Harrison Jr.? How do the Cardinals protect Kyler Murray, and what are realistic expectations for the rest of the season? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cardinals, Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner _ Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, bringing on one of my good friends in this industry who's had a meteoric rise since being with Locked On and the Locked On NFL Draft podcast many moons ago to talk Marvin Harrison Jr., one of his highest graded prospects in the history of his career in this business. Kyler Murray protection, not just on the field, ecosystem surrounding him, talent, offensive line, and everything in between. And what are realistic expectations for the Arizona Cardinals for the remainder of the 2024 season? That man is Trevor Sikkema, lead draft analyst for Pro Football Focus. One of my buddies at Tampa Bay, Trey, on Twitter. Dude, it's time to actually talk positively about the Cardinals.
I know it feels great. I've been really impressed with a lot of things the Cardinals have been doing. And honestly, that goes back to last year. I think you and I talked about this a little bit last year, where I was pleasantly surprised with how competitive this team was. And obviously it was a lot more losses than they wanted it to be, but those losses were a lot closer. There were some upsets. They were taking it down to the wire with some good teams. And, I don't know if you should say that like Kyler Murray playing quite at the level that he is already is to be expected, but it was to be expected that team was going to get even better this year. And I think that we're seeing the fruits of that.
Yeah, and with the infusion of massive amounts of forward front like dysfunction in front offices, I don't think we've ever had this introspection into front offices like we have now in the 24/7 news cycle of sports. Nothing's a secret anymore. With the Cardinals trending away from what they've been with dysfunctionality pretty much since their inception, it's a sight for sore eyes. Now, let's just talk right about it. Marvin Harrison Jr., I was in the camp for 80% of the offseason that the Cardinals needed to trade back out of 4 with Minnesota, whoever it was, to, recoup first-round picks, be able to fill the roster out. You told me I was crazy. You said he was one of the highest-graded prospects you've ever seen. And what we saw in week 2 was, like Kyler Murray, probably not the absolute norm, but closer to the norm, obviously, than what we saw in week 1.
Yeah, look, I was really impressed with him, certainly for week 2. Week 1 was a slow start for him. And look, I think that the aspect that people need to kind of remember about Marvin Harrison Jr. is that, like, he's not in the Hall of Fame yet, right? I mean, like, he's not his dad yet. He's not Megatron, right? And like, when we talk about, I know those weren't the same people, by the way. I wasn't calling Marvin Harrison Sr. Megatron, just so people don't yell at me, naming another really good receiver. It was always going to take a little bit of time, because it takes a little bit of time for everybody generally, even with a player, Marvin Harrison Jr., who, yeah, I think from a scouting perspective, I think you can ask a lot of people around the industry, it was hard to find holes in his game. And I think the thing that he struggled with the most in week 1 was sort of the speed of the NFL game. And I think you saw that from himself as well. There were times when I watched him in week 1, I was like, he is slow. Why? Is he hurt? Like, is he playing hurt? What is going on? And I think it was just a little bit of a lack of confidence, right? Everybody talks about how much faster you play when you are free and you know exactly what's coming at you. It just did not feel like Harrison Jr. knew what was coming at him. And I think you saw that in the drop pass as well. And so there were just a handful of little things where you could feel he was not nearly as confident. Now, the week 2 game, I will say it was better. He looked faster. He looked more confident. Now, like, the 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, that's a little overinflated as well, right? Because Kyler was just making magic happen. It was a lot of broken plays, but it was nice to see that on those broken plays, where's his eyes go to? Oh, well, they went to MHJ. And it's like, all right, well, they've already kind of got that chemistry and connection to, okay, this play is broken. I'm running to the sideline. I only got a few steps until I got to throw the ball. Where's Marvin Harrison Jr. at? And, that first touchdown they caught, I don't want to take anything away from it on that one. That was beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful footwork, beautiful catch concentration. And that's the thing you love about Marvin Harrison Jr. So to me, week one was slower than I kind of thought it would be. Week two, maybe the performance was a little bit overinflated. I think he's just going to continue to get better as the year goes on. And I think week one, it was nice to kind of get this out of the way because you're going to watch receivers like what we're seeing with Malik Neighbors. We'll see it with Rome Odunze when he's fully healthy. A.D. Mitchell is like this as well. These guys are winning with speed. They're fast. They're really fast receivers. And Harrison Jr. doesn't run like them. And so to see it in week one, for people to get an understanding that this guy is not a blazer, but that doesn't mean he's a bad receiver by any means. He just might be a little bit more of a contested catch type of a dude over the first year, maybe two of his career, before you hope that he gets a lot of that nuance down, a lot of that confidence down, and turns into probably, what I think could be a Davante Adams type of receiver, right? Because you think of Davante doesn't kill you by being the fastest receiver out there. He kills you by being an elite route runner, somebody who's great in contested catch situations, beautiful footwork, and strong hands when it comes to catching at the sideline. Like, that's the type of player that Marvin Harrison Jr. can be. And so that's kind of my thoughts of week one to week two of what we saw from MHJ.
Well, he could have been a 22-year-old kid who was nervous to play in his first NFL game. Heaven forbid.
Right.
The beauty of what I saw from his touchdowns were, and what made me scream the most, first was the half yard of closing, area, be able to catch the ball 2 feet down and control the ball. I'd much rather see that than him standing in the back of the end zone in a broken play. It doesn't show anything. The second touchdown was even more impressive to me because he didn't run comeback save quarterback. He said, "Oh, I've got leverage over the top. I'm gone." Like it's in between his head is what the real speed is going to be. And yeah, like DeAndre Hopkins, Andre Johnson, Reggie Wayne wasn't the fastest. His dad wasn't the fastest. Like, you don't have to have this speed to be elite. You don't have to be Tyreek Hill to be elite. So I agree with you on that. And like, I think that because he's not and I said this one with the trade back stuff, it's like, he's going to be the third option going into year one. James Conner, Trey McBride are going to be the first two options. So he has a lot less pressure to produce. Now, for him, ceiling wise, can he be a guy who's 1,800 yards and 15 touchdowns? Or are you going to see a guy that's going to kill you with consistency every year, 1,400, 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns, 140 catches, and that's just what it's going to be? Or are we going to see these just bonkers numbers from him?
No, I'm not going to sit here and say that, you got to expect 1,800 yards and things like that. Is a season like that possible? Sure. But you often have to have, I would say, some elite athletic traits to do this stuff, right? Like that's why Tyreek Hill does is because Tyreek Hill is just a mismatch for basically every football player that he goes up against. And so it's possible to do those things. What Justin Jefferson was doing, Justin Jefferson's got great speed, but he's also this crazy quick route runner when it comes to separation skills and things like that. And so that's why you see a great season from him there as well. But killing people with consistency, I don't want that to be the other side of the coin as a negative, but I really do think that his floor as a receiver to me is so high. He feels like a guy who's always going to be capable of getting 1,000 yards for you every single season, no matter what. And, the more confident he gets, of course, year 3, year 4, and year 5 into that rookie contract, you're hoping that it's, 1,200, 1,300 yard seasons all the time. And touchdowns are always kind of, they're coin flips anyway. They're a little bit situational depending on how games go, but that he's always got the potential to be able to do that. So again, just kind of going back to Davante Adams. I mean, he to me is the ceiling for what Marvin Harrison Jr. can be. And I actually don't know off the top of my head what the best Davante Adams season was when he was in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, but it just felt like he was consistently a guy who was able to take over games for you, be a wide receiver one. And I think that's the thing that matters. It's not just the year by year consistency of, can I, get, is he going to be like a Mike Evans type where he's just getting 1,000 yards every single season? It's more of the consistency game to game. And I know those two things are very tied together, but no matter what the matchup is, whether you're scoring 21 this week or whether you're scoring 44 this week, you want him to be the guy leading the charge for you. And whenever you can lean on the passing game, that's who you really want to go through. I think he's that caliber of a player. But, you talk about getting 2,000 yards receiving, stuff like that. It's so hard to do when you don't have just this elite speed trait specifically, because when you talk about churning those kinds of yards up, you've got to get 3, 4, 5, 6 catches during that season where you take a 30-yard catch and you turn it into an 80-yard catch.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, that's where those extra yards come from. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to say that with MHJ, but it doesn't take away from what he could be in an offense.
Well, yeah, and if you're looking at 2,000 yards from him, something else is broken. I mean, you don't need him to be you don't need him to be carrying the offense, which is something we've grown accustomed to with young players, irrespective of position for the Cardinals, needing to carry more weight than maybe they're ready to. And for those who forget, Davante Adams had cinder blocks his hands his rookie year. The dude couldn't catch anything. The year that Jordy Nelson tore his ACL in camp, Davante Adams struggled. And it took him a while. The one stat for Davante Adams before he pivoted, I'm glad you brought him up, is I think it was in 2021, Davante Adams had more red zone catches than DeAndre Hopkins had targets. Davante Adams is the guy that everybody knew was going to get the ball, and he still was open to get the ball. And if Marvin Harrison Jr. turns into that guy for the Cardinals, something they haven't had since Larry Fitzgerald in his prime, it's going to be a pretty good situation for the Cardinals. Trevor Sikkema, lead draft analyst at Pro Football Focus, joining me here. Kyler Murray under a microscope next in more ways than one. We'll discuss it next. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our friends at DoorDash. So listen, football's here. If you got Sunday ticket, like I do, I ain't leaving the house. I've got a lot of things that I'm watching, and I don't have time to go get food. That's why DoorDash is so clutch, man. And it's not just like, oh, it's just pizza, or, oh, it's just food. They deliver everything. Like if you're living in Phoenix, Postino, lighter fare. If you're on a weight kick and you want to eat something, charcuterie boards and wine, whatever it is, you can do something like Postino. If you want just massive burgers, Rehab Burger in Old Town Scottsdale is on DoorDash as well, and everything in between. Remember, use promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Limited time offer, terms do apply. Promo is not valid to orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day success, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's number one sports. Why the hell wouldn't we talk about them? They've got something new. And now it's only through September 22nd, so it's coming up. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. If you haven't checked out the new Sunday Ticket, it is absolutely bonkers. It's super easy watchability, so you want to check it out. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. They're loading up the afternoon slate more than ever, so you want to take advantage of that. All you'll need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Visit FanDuel.com. Download America's number one sportsbook. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, joining me. NFL Stock Exchange, nailed it. Him and Connor Rogers do a great job. I always butcher it for some reason. It's the easiest podcast name and title to say. I butcher it every time. They do a fantastic job. Unlike the 25 minutes that I do, they'll do 2-day benders with one show. It's a lot, especially getting around draft time. It is intense. They have a great job. You guys, you've been doing it a long time together. It's obvious and it shows. So they do a fantastic job over there. Kyler Murray. I did a segment yesterday where I tell people me, I'm forever the realist looking to the future. Chill. It was fantastic. And it showed the proof of concept that that's what Kyler Murray can be in a vacuum at his best, which is MVP caliber. Okay, he does it. He's dipsy doodle in the backfield. He's making Jared Verse look like he's in a washing machine, and he's throwing a touchdown pass in the back of the end zone, doing the Steph Curry turnaround before it even becomes an actual touchdown catch. With that terrifies me. Because if that's what's relied upon, and I'm not saying it is, but if that's what's relied upon for this offense to hum in the pass game, that's not sustainable. So talk to me about what you saw from Kyler in week 2. You've been watching him since 2019. How can the Cardinals Drew Petzing him more and keep him while allowing him those oh my God moments to keep him safer in the process?
Yeah, look, I totally understand kind of what you're talking about here, where you go ooh and ah for all the broken plays that he was able to save, especially last game, but you don't want to live there, right? And I think that there's there's something to a quarterback just playing his best ball. And sometimes you want to appreciate, like, I think about Lamar's first MVP season, right? Where Lamar had so many of those plays. And it's just like, it's the reason why he was MVP, right? And it feels like Kyler can play at that MVP caliber level again, like he did, what was it, the 2021 season, if I'm remembering correctly? That was the season that he absolutely went off and he was playing so well. Like, what we saw this past week is reminiscent of that. And I said this before the season. I predicted that this was going to be the closest thing that we have seen yet to him getting back to that MVP level. Was he going to ascend above it? I wasn't sure about that, but I was very confident that he was going to get close to that level, if not matching that level, if not getting better at that level with sort of the wisdom that he has imparted on now being fully healthy. So yes, you don't want to live with, okay, there's this many broken play. It's the same conversation that we talked about at the very beginning with Marvin Harrison Jr. 4 catches, 130 yards, right? I mean, like, it's just like that tells you that there's some crazy non-structured stuff going on. So Harrison Jr.'s stat line was in nature of what was going on with Kyler Murray, but it's sort of simple. I think the run game's got to be a little bit better, right? James Conner has been better throughout his career. I think he had a really great year last year, earning an elite rushing grade from us in our grading system. So, he's off to a little bit of a slow start. I think his rushing grades are somewhere in the mid 60s, which is fine. But I think you got to kind of get the run game down a little bit more. You've got to be able to take more off of Kyler Murray's plate in that regard, where he doesn't feel like he has to be that Superman type of player. Some quick hit stuff, but I think that they're doing some of that already. I've seen a little bit of that especially in week 1. I think they were very comfortable going to Greg Dortch in those situations. And I think Trey McBride's going to continue to get more and more involved into the offense, because it feels like it's been a little bit of a slow start for McBride, if I'm kind of, remembering correctly off of watching these live. But it's sort of, McBride was the guy last year in the passing game, and now he doesn't have to be the guy. You mentioned that sort of talking point with Marvin Harrison Jr., but now that it's a collective, it's kind of for the same thing. So it's really figuring out, what kind of recipe is best for all the different ingredients you have. And that's an offensive coordinator's job. And he's not supposed to have it all figured out, especially as a first-year guy in week 2. And so I think what happens after this is, all right, you've got some of the Superman plays, you've seen all that, but you don't want to rely upon that. You don't want that to be like, okay, our game plan this week is Kyler just go be Superman. Like you said, that gets you in trouble. But I think that game plan for them is simply got to play your best up front, whatever that looks like for the offensive line currently as it is constructed. You got to be able to lean on the run game more like you did last year, get Trey McBride a little bit more involved. And I think just, get a little bit more chemistry with some of those guys and those quick passes and things like that. That means you're not going to have so many Superman plays from Kyler Murray, even though he's capable of doing them. Yeah,
for sure. And you're looking at the landscape of quarterback play. I mean, there are 10 plus bad quarterbacks in the NFL by average NFL quarterback standards. And I've said Kyler Murray just needs to be an elite game manager with an infusion of those oh my God moments, and the Cardinals are going to win more games than they lose. It doesn't, and it's something that you're right. Like the run game, I think that the thing that Drew Petzing is struggling with, and this is kind of second tier thinking, at least, from my stance, is their defense is so under talented for what they need to actually compete for, deep playoff runs, that you run the ball more, it eats more clock. The best defense the Cardinals have is their run game to be able to keep that defense off the field and keep the offense humming. And I think that they need to figure out that sweet spot where you don't need to lead with the run 15 carries in the first quarter just to do that. And I think you're right, Drew Petzing, they'll figure it out. And I think the ceiling is non-existent for this offense with Kyler Murray. But if Kyler Murray gets hurt, that is a stop on a massive trajectory shift in a positive direction for this team. So it should be fascinating to see what the Cardinals do for the rest of the year. Now, what are the realistic expectations? They've got the NFC Championship contender from last year in Detroit Lions coming into town. What are the realistic expectations for the Cardinals moving forward? I will ask Trevor Sigma on Pro Football Focus next. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by Bink, the GameTime app. So GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets easier than ever. They filter out the fluff and give you only the best options. They've got this thing you can toggle to that's all-in pricing. So you just go up, you toggle to it, all-in pricing, and it shows you the total price out the door, no fees afterwards. So it makes it super simple when you're looking to buy baseball tickets to go see the Diamondbacks coming down the stretch, or, Suns tickets that are right around the corner, or Cardinals games. The seat views is the best part, though. You click on, a game with a section and a row that you want to sit in. Maybe you haven't sat in left field and Chase Field and you want to see what the vantage point is. You can click on them. It'll show you a vantage point from the seats before you buy them, so you know exactly what your vantage point will be once you buy those tickets. It's an absolute game changer. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the GameTime app. Download the GameTime app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time? That wasn't supposed to be a question. Game time. Period.
Yeah.
Just for everybody. Trevor Sikkema, lead draft analyst, Pro Football Focus, co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange with Connor Rogers, does a great job at Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter. At Clancy's Corner _ for me. I may have a lead to be getting my main Twitter back. Looks like Elon's doing a little work with the back end, so you can actually help. It's pretty exciting stuff. TBD. What is exciting in kind of like a 65% terrifying, 35% confident ways the Lions coming into town for the Cardinals on Sunday. The best offensive line in football, arguably the best young pass rusher, arguably Aiden Hutchinson, who had a 5-spot sacks last week against Baker Mayfield in a losing effort. This is a perfect litmus test time for the Cardinals to see what this offensive line is, what the pass rush is, and everything in between. Trevor, when you looked at the schedule from the Cardinals, going into it, it's a murderer's row setup all the way through their bye week. It's not fun. Yeah. But then you look at what's happened this year. There have been some injuries, and across the league, the Rams aren't who they were, and you could be potentially seeing the Cardinals in the hunt later in the season. Going into this season and what you know now, realistic expectations for this team, you can give a win total, educated guess, but just more theory than anything.
I think I had them with 7 wins, if I remember correctly, for my season prediction. I think I had them at 7-10, and even that felt low. But like you said, it's just, they play a lot of really good teams this year. There's not a lot of teams that I go, okay, yeah, that's a dub, even for the Cardinals. But you have to be encouraged by where they're at, and it felt like 7 was where I was at. But I felt like 7 was almost a low number for them. I feel like something, 9, maybe you get to double digits. That would be a fantastic season for them. If you get to double digits, obviously Kyler is just playing extremely well. The defense is sort of punching above their weight class. Things are humming on offense if you get to that point. But, you just look at kind of short term for inviting the Detroit Lions into town. I think that you put it correctly. This is a big barometer game for them because you probably should have beat the Bills in week 1, right? Mm-hmm. That was an opportunity that you had there on the road. You were the better team, I think, for most of the game. And it just, they blew it. I think that's the only way to say it. They had that game and they could have won it and they let it slip through their grasp. Obviously, It's a dominant win against a team that's really beat up in the injury front, which kind of sucks in the Rams. But, now you're in a situation where you go, okay, even if you say, all right, the Rams win, it doesn't really count. They're kind of beat up. They're not really the team that we all thought they were going to be. You could talk about how you were the better team in Buffalo for most of that game, and now you're inviting the Detroit Lions into your house. And I think that there's a real reality where this is a close game and one that they could absolutely win. And if it is one that they win, then you have to start talking about the Cardinals as a legit football team, because this, I'm telling you, this is going to be what happens. If the Cardinals win this game, all the talk is going to be on is Detroit frauds because they lose the Buccaneers in week 2, and then they lose to the Cardinals in week 3. I think both of those games are less of the Lions being frauds. And okay, maybe they're not playing as best as they could, but it's much more about the Buccaneers being better than people thought, and certainly the Cardinals being better than people thought. And so where a lot of the national takeaway is going to be about what's wrong with the Lions, if the Cardinals win this game, I will be somebody who is saying, no. We need to give the Cardinals credit for how they're playing this season. This could be a team that would easily be 3-0 if they handle business in the second half of that Buffalo game. And so, and then obviously, if they lose, I still think it's going to be competitive. I don't think they're going to get the doors blown off of them. And then you kind of just go from there. At that point, the season is a little bit week to week. You're just trying to understand what this team is, try to play the best ball that you can. But if they beat Detroit, that's a pretty special win for this team, and it could end up being a pretty special season for them.
Yeah, they've got Cliffy Baby coming into town in week 4 with Washington, which is going to be, fascinating time. And it's interesting because I said if the Cardinals go 2-2 in the first 4 weeks, that is an absolute bona fide happy birthday come early win. It's an absolute win. And you're right. Like, for Cardinals fans, and this is something I've struggled with, trying to explain to people and have conversations with, everydayers of this podcast and just on Twitter and social media in general, is the Cardinals don't deserve the credit yet. They're in 2021 were looked at as absolute frauds, even when they were 10-2, and they were right. And I knew, like, it just wasn't. It wasn't that the defining loss in that season was on the road, Dan Campbell's first year against Detroit, when they had no talent, when they just traded for Jared Goff. So it's funny how things come full circle. The Cardinals' stability is something you want to kind of structure. It's funny you said about Tampa Bay. Like, I know that, you grew up in Florida, or you live in Florida, or you've lived in Florida, and you were close to the Tampa Bay organization.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason Light has done everything. It's like you have the aftershocks of Tom Brady that just built this thing that's stable. And then you have a stable quarterback. You've got skill position players that are great with the receivers. You've got a good defense, and it's like, or they've got a good defense, and it's something that the Cardinals should be mirroring in their own right. It's going to take some time, but it's just an interesting to see the transition. Now, one last thing, and I'm asking everybody that I trust in this damn business, Trevor, nobody's agreed with me yet, and it's fine. Feel free. I'm in the camp that 28-year-old Budda Baker, soon to be 29, 29-year-old James Conner, with the $90+ million the Cardinals have in cap next year, with the cap they'll roll over from this year because they haven't spent everything, should 100%, no doubt about it, be an Arizona Cardinal for the next 2 seasons. And obviously, James Conner is going to garner less money, but the production will maybe be a little bit lower. Budda Baker is going to want more, but he has more of an impact on defense. I think they should bring them both back. Give me your thoughts.
I certainly think that they should approach negotiations with that idea in mind. I don't think that it should be we got to let these guys walk no matter what. You mentioned it. They've got the cap space to be able to do it, and you're going in that direction, right? I think they're probably, as of this point, when I look at the Cardinals and how they're succeeding, they're kind of like almost like half a year, if not a year ahead of schedule for what the rebuild would have been. And you have another kick-ass offseason. I mean, those are 2 good players who know the locker room, who are obviously around both sides of the ball, have performed well before for this team. You're in a situation where you have another really good offseason, double-digit wins. I mean, like, you're talking about a playoff team next year. You would want that experience anyway. So, yeah, I think that a short-term sort of contract for both those guys. Now, will they want to sign it? I don't know. Of course, right. I think, Connor's probably going to want as much money as he possibly can, because it's probably going to be the last deal that he signs, with him being 30 years old or getting towards 30 years old. Budda Baker, probably the same thing, depending on how big his deal is, depending on what he could get elsewhere. But yeah, I think that you try to sign these guys, break the bank for them. I don't know. It obviously depends what they want, but they should go into negotiations with good faith and saying, like, we want you on this team. We are going to be a playoff team next year. We want you to be there leading us into the playoffs. And obviously you kind of go from there and see what happens. Yeah.
Budda Baker's been through the S with this team pretty much since being drafted, aside from 2021. It's like he got his money. The request of the trade by Rap Sheet last offseason, which was a joke. They gave him, fully guaranteed money. They gave him elevators for this season. I feel like we would have heard something already if Budda Baker wanted a contract extension. I feel like there's been a handshake deal behind the scenes where it's like, listen, let's table it. We want you back, and things like that. So, I just think it'll be interesting. Just because they drafted Trey Benson and drafted Tadrian Taylor Demerson doesn't mean that those guys are going to be ready to take over those roles next year. Right. I think it's just a fallacy. Now, One last thing before I get you out of here. At Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter, lead draft analyst over at Pro Football Focus. Hassan Reddick's there. Yannick Ngakoue's there. One of the biggest issues or conversations, arguments I've had with people, listeners, and Cardinals fans is that they didn't do anything on defense. No splash moves. And I'm trying to explain to people that there were like 3 top-tier guys on free agency this year. Christian Wilkins and a couple other. I mean, Marcus Davenport on the outside. Do you think the Cardinals are in a position now where moves need to be made? Obviously, if Hassan Reddick, it's kind of trickier because he's going to want a lot more cheese than they're going to give him. Or do you just ride or die with the guys they have now and maybe add a veteran piece around the trade deadline?
Yeah, I don't make moves. I really don't. I think that I think Austin Fort's done a really good job building this team, and I think that you continue to give him the space and the time to be able to do that. They're not quite in the let's go get the veteran who's on the market. Let's take it, because if they add one of those guys, are you spending too much money? Are you spending the draft capital that you have to trade to go get him? And then are you spending the cap space that you got to have to go sign him? Specifically Hassan Reddick, right? That's the guy. Like Yannick Ngakoue is free agent for a reason.
Yep.
Reddick's the one guy who you go, is he worth being a difference maker to like maybe make the playoffs and just make the wild card round? Because after that, you go, okay, well, what's it going to be next year? Is he going to still be the same player next year? So I would wait. If I'm a Cardinals, you are already on the upward trajectory and you're not quite there where you would say, yes, like let's go get the veteran type of player. I think Austin Fort's doing a really good job with the resources that he's been given. And so I'd keep those resources in his hands, to be honest with you.
Is he the darling child in the Pro Football Focus offices? Every single person, like Spielberger when he was there, Eric Eager when he was there, everybody loves Monty Austinford and what he's done with this team.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to criticize him, honestly, for taking over that Cardinals situation the way that he did and having the draft class that he's been able to have. And, you know, the behind the scenes films of him wheeling and dealing in his first draft and not being afraid to, you know, negotiate the way that you need to make it happen. And he's got a really good understanding of positional value and contractual value and draft value and all that. And when you have a franchise caliber type of quarterback already in place, well, then you trust a guy like that to build out the rest of the roster. And so that's why I like where the Cardinals are going.
Tell everybody where they can find you, dude.
At Tampa Bay Trey on Twitter and Instagram, and then doing all sorts of shows all over the place for Pro Football Focus on our YouTube channel and anywhere you listen to podcasts, as well as, like you mentioned, the NFL Stock Exchange, same thing, anywhere on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts.
Alex Clancy, Locked on Cardinals crossover Thursday tomorrow. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you then.